Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to discuss some things that I think are important when it comes to riding your one wheel during the colder months of the year, including information that can keep you from permanently and severely damaging your one wheel. This footage was shot right before a snowstorm hit the Northeast and the temperature outside was about 21 degrees Fahrenheit or about -6 or 7 degrees Celsius. It was cold. Nevertheless, I rode around for the sole purpose of having footage for this video, and so let's start. Tip number 5, wear proper footwear. I promise you this is not a throwaway tip. My feet are the very first body part that gets uncomfortably cold when riding during the winter. Even with layers of clothing and a face covering, my feet end up freezing in less than 15 minutes. Footwear ends up being a bit of a compromise though, since the shoes that I prefer for riding tend to be thinner and flexible for the sake of board feel and control. However, when I've lost the feeling in my feet, that ends up being a moot point.
It's moo.
So often I'll use an extra pair of socks, specifically thicker socks, and just loosen up the shoes to fit. Most times that's enough since I don't end up riding for too long in the cold anyway. I know I could probably do more here, but at least I gave it an extra pair of socks worth of thought. And it's the thought that counts. Tip number 4, pack light. Weight makes a big difference when riding a one wheel, and that's even more so in the cold for a few reasons. If you normally go out with a backpack full of big old chargers, tire pumps, spare tire sealant, an extra helmet for your float buddies, essential oil, alternative medicine, stoke butter, cease and desist letters from Future Motion, and a battery to swap out, then you probably should consider just not doing that. Chances are your winter clothing is heavier and also bulkier than what you'd have on during the warmer months. Winter clothing can really add up the pounds, and the bulkier profile adds wind resistance even when there may not be any additional headwinds. So save the load-bearing equipment for the spring and summer when it's nicer to go out for a longer ride anyway. Tip number 3, plan for shorter rides. Tips 3, 2, and 1 all revolve around the same basic cause, and it has to do with how cold temperatures affect battery performance. It's probably no surprise that as the weather got colder, your mileage on the board started to drop. Sometimes you can get as little as 50 to 60% of your normal range when riding in cold temperatures. This is normal and to be expected. Lithium-ion batteries have an optimal operating temperature range around 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Most battery cell datasheets specify 25 degrees Celsius. When the temperature drops, so does performance. The usable capacity of the battery falls, as does its ability to output current. This results in a couple of things, and in this case, a significant drop in usable mileage. If you're out and about in freezing temperatures, plan to ride for much shorter distances. Your battery will thank you for it. So if you're riding a pint and only getting 3 to 5 miles at best, there's nothing actually wrong with your board. At least, not yet. Keep watching to see what I mean. Tip number 2, slow down. For the same reason that you're getting fewer miles per charge in the cold, you're going to experience less power and torque. When batteries reach lower temperatures, their maximum current output drops as well. That means that a very cold battery can't keep up with the demands of the controller and the motor. Remember that the motor does everything from moving you forward to keeping you balanced, and the faster you go, the less torque there is available to even things out like bumps and dips, and to accelerate the board if you lean forward. Current draw is most closely related to the torque output of the motor, and so when you have less available current from the battery, you've got less available power. Nosedives happen more easily in situations where they normally wouldn't, and the colder your battery gets, the less power your board is going to have. When you combine this with the extra drag of heavier, bulkier winter clothing, it's really important to slow down and avoid the extra risk. Tip number 1, do not charge your board cold. Yes, mileage drops and you're riding slower, so you'll just bring your fancy new fast charger and sit in the cold while you get some extra juice, right? Well, if it's freezing outside, no, don't do it. You see, lithium-ion cells have diminished performance at lower temperatures, but they'll still work. If a battery is at or below freezing temperatures, it will still discharge and it can still be used. However, lithium-ion cells should never be charged at those low temperatures, and certainly never charged when they are at freezing temperatures. Trying to charge a lithium-ion battery at or below freezing temperatures does permanent and significant damage to the internals of the cells. It also makes them less safe and increases the risk of future catastrophic failure. If you would like to know more details on how they get damaged from this, as well as what kind of damage, I'll leave information in the description for you to click through and do some extra reading. So if you're out riding in freezing cold weather, you're putting your board at risk if you intend on charging while you're out. This damage is made worse by faster charging rates, which is most common when charging outside. That fancy new 6 amp charger will wreak havoc on your battery. You can use the Onewheel app to check your battery temperatures while you're out and try to minimize the damage that way. But even if it's above freezing, you're going to damage the cells a bit if you're charging a battery whose temperature is below about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. It won't be as much damage, but again, the higher charging rates will amplify the issue. For the same reasons, you shouldn't plug your board in right away when you get home from a cold weather ride. Give it time to come to room temperature before you charge. This will ensure that your battery lasts as long as it can. This XR is pretty much stock. Original battery since about November 2018. I still get 19 miles per charge during warm months and about 11 miles during the winter. That's something to consider if you're looking to get the most longevity as possible out of your board. So, I thank you for watching. I hope this was at least partially helpful. Stay tuned for more tip videos. Be safe and don't fall. By the way, we're going to take a few minutes and answer some questions from my previous video. If you haven't seen it, it's a video where I build a portable charger for my Onewheels. I will link to it in a card. Feel free to check that out if you haven't already. EUC Addict says, have you considered charging your Onewheel at EV charging stations? I've seen the adapters that are sold to convert EV charging stations to an outlet for the charger. They're interesting, they are cool, but they're also large and fairly bulky, and if I'm going to carry a large contraption to charge my board, I'm just going to carry my power bank because power bank doesn't have an extra cost associated with it. EV charging stations are pay to use, so I'd rather just keep my power bank charged, take it with me if I need it. I heart IHOP. That was a cool build. Is there any benefit over going with a portable generator battery pack for cheaper? So the portable generators are good, but they're not meant for the kind of power output that you need to charge a relatively large battery like that of a Onewheel. Now, what you also end up having is a situation where the battery of that portable generator outputs power, it's converted with an inverter to AC current to use an outlet plug with, and then your charger converts that back into DC current. So those two steps of conversion end up losing more of the power that should go into your battery, because every time you convert electricity from one form to another, you're losing a bunch of it to heat through the converter. So it's a bit wasteful, it's not a very efficient way to go, and I'd rather just have something that specifically stays with a battery going through a DC converter and not losing any more of the electricity than you need to. Chandoli says, any reason you went with a 7S battery if you're boosting all the way to 60? The basic reason is that there are 28 cells that fit in that case, and so there are only a certain amount of configurations you can have for S7S, 14S, or 28S. I went with 7 because 14S would require a much larger BMS that would not fit well in the case. Terrell asks, do you ride with a charger port plug? Sometimes. I usually lose them, and so when I lose them, I don't ride with one. WizRom says, I would have used a couple of ready-made 10S batteries you can buy on eBay for cheap. Okay, so that's basically what Carve Power has going. They have cases like aluminum boxes. One holds the converter, and then below them there's a 10S battery. It's a hoverboard battery, that brick-shaped thing. You can find those fairly cheap, and Carve Power is a wonderful option if you don't want to build something or you don't have the money to get something more expensive. Carve Power uses the same converter, but it uses those hoverboard 10S batteries, and so those are great. As for the VU meter style, I wasn't really thinking of that. That would be cool, but I wanted to kind of keep the build as simple as possible. So that's about it. If you have a question you want me to answer at the end of my next video, feel free to leave that in the comments below. Once again, I always appreciate your viewership. Thank you for watching, and don't fall.